I believed her. I helped her. I did not see what she was.
Mr. Wolf, villains who twirl their mustaches are easy to spot. Those who clothe themselves in good deeds are well camouflaged.
While not necessarily the polar opposite of the mustache-twirling, dastardly whiplash villain, you can't get much further on the other end of the spectrum of villainy than those who use your trust in them and their public reputation to their advantage. These villains can range anywhere from being beloved by society in spite of their obvious flaws, to those who simply know when to put on a performance in public so they can terrorize in private. This is a much older kind of villain, which has existed far longer than most, and is one of the most heinous kinds. The kind you never see coming, or the kind you can't warn others about because they refuse to listen. They are the wolf in sheep's clothing.
Oh, you better come on, because I know one of you is a wolf. Yeah. Wolf! Wolf? Wolf?
I'm Danger Dan Jers, and this is Evolution. Spoilers ahead for the following. The concept of a wolf in sheep's clothing is a very old one, and the origin of the phrase likely can be traced back to somewhere between 620 and 560 BC in one of Aesop's fables. Once upon a time, a wolf resolved to disguise his appearance in order to secure food more easily. Encased in the skin of a sheep, he pastured with the flock, deceiving the shepherd by his costume. In the evening, he was shut up by the shepherd in the fold. The gate was closed, and the entrance made thoroughly secure. But the shepherd, returning to the fold during the night to obtain meat for the next day, mistakenly caught up the wolf instead of a sheep, and killed him instantly.
That was intense. Really intense. Well, not really intense, but pretty intense.
In the English language, the term most likely traces back to early printings of the Bible.
Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves.
Now, in a broader sense, the term wolf in sheep's clothing can apply to just about any character that demonstrates that they are not what they seem. So, for our purposes, we're going to narrow the definition a little bit to focus specifically on villains who employ deceptive tactics and weaponize their reputation. This does mean that a single act of betrayal isn't enough here.
Traitor!
Since there's way too many examples to pull from there. People have been betraying each other's trust as long as there have been people around to betray.
Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal!
Besides, betrayal stories are often about a single moment of weakness that marks a person for the rest of their days, proving that we are only as good as our worst moments. And that's not what the heart of this trope is about at all. Instead, what we're looking for is a much more particular and insidious kind of character. A well-trusted person leveraging their reputation in order to get away with all manner of cruel and despicable deeds. The clearest example I could find of this character type as we understand them today is rooted in the 1565 Italian tale Un Capitano Muro by Giovanni Battista Giraldi Cinthio. This story features an unnamed antagonist known only as the Ensign, who lusts for his commanding officer's bride-to-be. He spends the story laying an intricate groundwork of deception in order to take out his jealousy on the captain. He has the complete trust of most of his contemporaries and uses that to his advantage, as he convinces them all to act in all manner of suspicious ways in order to convince his captain that his bride is having an affair. If this story sounds at all familiar to you, it's probably because it is. In 1603, this story's much more famous younger sibling was born when William Shakespeare adapted it for the stage in what is widely considered to be one of the best, if not the best play he'd ever written. Othello, the Moor of Venice. Here, the character of the ensign is given the name Iago, And if you know any theater geeks, just ask any one of them and they'll probably tell you he's on their bucket list of characters they want to play. And for good reason. He has a reputation as being one of the greatest theatrical villains of all time.
Excellent work, Iago.
Go on.
No, really, on a scale of 1 to 10, you are an 11.
This is largely because of several clever and important distinctions between the original text and the stage play. For one, Iago is more explicitly given a name, history, and characterization from the others around him as Honest Iago. It is quite obvious that he is revered and well respected by all, and though the audience is well aware of his intentions, none of the other characters can see past the persona he's built up for himself, with the exception of his wife, who has some suspicions, but even she is caught off guard by just how dark his true intentions really are. We also don't know why he does what he does. Iago is not motivated by lust like the ensign from the original book is, but instead by pure, unbridled hatred. And we never get a clear answer as to where that hatred comes from and why he despises Othello so much. There is some speculation that Iago's wife may have had an affair with Othello, but Iago himself says that he doesn't care whether or not that's actually true. He needs no real reason to ruin Othello's life because, simply put,
I hate the Moor.
And Shakespeare understood that any motivation beyond that was not important to the story. We aren't meant to sympathize with Iago, even accidentally. Instead, we're meant to see his cunning, his ruthlessness, and his charm as a distillation of pure evil at its most human. Even at the play's end, when he's eventually caught, where most villainous characters that came before him, and a majority that would come after him as well, would take this opportunity to either repent, express regret, gloat, or to explain why they are actually justified in what they were done, Iago outright refuses to say anything at all, leaving a chilling lack of closure for all involved, and the lingering question of how they could ever trust him to begin with.
You don't have to build a city to make people worship you. Just make the chumps believe they're worth a nickel.
Built on the foundations laid by Iago, this character type would become extremely popular in the 20th century, especially in the spy genre. Nearly every Bond villain falls into this category in some way, shape, or form just by nature of what the genre demands. They are mostly all wealthy and powerful socialites with very good publicity and a hidden agenda. These villains usually have a grand scheme that is thwarted by the hero, and they nearly always die before justice is served to them, and the public continues on, never the wiser. Kingsman: The Secret Service parodies this character type with Richmond Valentine, a quirky American tech guru and billionaire with a speech impediment and an aversion to seeing blood. Spy movies in particular tend to lean very hard on giving these villains a memorable tick so that they stand out from one another, since pretty much all of them are more or less interchangeable. He gains public trust and adoration with false generosity and philanthropy while actually hiding a cataclysmic scheme. He then goes on to die unceremoniously, and the public just moves on as if nobody was paying attention. After the spy renaissance of the 20th century, the 90s and early aughts saw this character type continue to explode in popularity. And this time, it was the female characters who dominated.
Let's go, girls.
Especially common in stories with lower stakes, and extremely popular on Nickelodeon specifically, characters like Angelica Pickles from Rugrats began to pop up more and more often, using their innocent demeanor to shield them from consequences. Nicktoons kids who grew up in this generation went on to learn a new curse word,
Make it!
and jam out to the hottest diss track of 2001.
Hey Vicky, you're so icky. Just the thought of being around you makes me oh so sicky.
What this new wave of villains had in common was the persistence to keep getting away with it. either because of lack of witnesses, lack of evidence, or, in Vicky's case, because the adult characters were generally too stupid to function.
Hello, Mr. Turner? It's me, Mr. Turner! I'm driving with my feet!
But as fun as they all are, they're not where this character type flourishes the most. Where they really get interesting is when they operate on a much broader scale, especially when we look at the way they utilize technology and the media.
See, that wasn't so hard.
The way in which these villains manipulate the masses can tell us just as much about their society, and by extension our own, as it can about the villain themselves. In Spider-Man Far From Home, Mysterio is able to capitalize on the innate naivety and innocence of the MCU in a time where they are collectively mourning the events of Endgame and are desperate for a hero that caters to their nostalgic sense of black and white morality, during a time in which no one truly knows what is and is not off the table.
The story you created of a soldier from another Earth named Quentin fighting space monsters in Europe is totally ridiculous and apparently exactly the kind of thing people will believe right now. I mean, everybody bought it.
Other similar characters include Zachary Hale Comstock from the 2013 game BioShock Infinite. Comstock weaponizes religion at the tail end of the 19th century to convince the Confederate South, which is still reeling from the American Civil War, that their way of life and racial supremacy over minority races and classes is not only justified, but a moral imperative. He uses the fact that he exists in a state of quantum uncertainty to convince his followers that he is a prophet of God, and that seceding from the Union by following him into the floating city of Columbia would not only preserve their way of life, but cement their moral and spiritual superiority, literally putting them above the rest of the world. We can infer from the characterization of Booker DeWitt that at least some part of Comstock does not genuinely believe what he professes, but that it's a convenient lie that gives him the resources he needs to reclaim his daughter Elizabeth and keep her under lock and key. All the while, he frames you as the false shepherd and himself as the bringer of truth, when it's more accurate to say it's the other way around.
I know the prophet is a liar, but he cannot be. I know the prophet is a murderer, but he cannot be. For if the future lies only in the imagination of God, why would he reveal it to such a monster?
The 1991 movie Cats Don't Dance gives us the same song, but a different verse, with Darla Dimple, who utilizes the popularity of her public persona as a sweet little innocent angel of a starlet in order to keep the Hollywood machine in a stranglehold and ensure that she never has to share the spotlight with anyone, especially not the animals. As a side note, you'll find that discriminations against minorities, or characters who are metaphors for minorities, is extremely common with this type of villain. Taken to the extreme, a particularly dark take on this character type can be found in Garth Ennis's The Boys. I'll be specifically talking about the TV series since I haven't read the comics, and from what I understand, the show deviates from the source material in pretty significant ways. While virtually every superpowered character in this show is a wolf in sheep's clothing to some extent, none are more so than Stormfront, an actual, genuine Nazi posing as a hashtag girl boss.
Girls get it done.
And cut a rehearsal, no one move, no one move, no one.
Initially framed as a foil to Homelander, she shows a masterful manipulation of internet culture to a degree that rivals Homelander's manipulation of traditional print and television media. She uses the internet's love of controversy, forum-based meme culture, and inherent need to challenge authority to develop a loyal following that she weaponizes against Homelander. She uses his megalomania against him in order to gradually groom him into a fascist sympathizer. This, by extension, broadens her reach and allows her to use Homelander to continue the spread of fascist propaganda using America incarnate to stoke fears of terrorism and loss of agency.
We're under attack.
We are?
Bad guys want to hurt us just because of what we look like. They want to wipe us from this earth just because of the color of our skin.
Really?
It's called white genocide.
Fuck off, Hitler.
Moving on to something marginally more palatable, Disney's Zootopia gives us what is probably the most on-the-nose example of this character type, with a villain who literally is a sheep hiding sinister motives beneath a meek exterior. Assistant Mayor Bellwether is consistently taken for granted, which is simultaneously her motivation and the thing she weaponizes to bring herself to power. She plays up her victim status while using society's prejudice against predatory creatures in order to manufacture a scenario that puts her in the position of mayor. She plays into fears of exploitation and savagery to divide and conquer, pitting the species against each other in a pretty direct and overt metaphor.
Go back to the forest, predator!
I'm from the savannah!
These predators may be reverting back to their primitive, savage ways? Are you serious?
I just stated the facts of the case. I mean, it's not like a bunny could go savage.
Kids, don't be racist.
Other notable examples of characters that fall into this category include Handsome Jack from Borderlands, Mom from Futurama, Lil Gideon from Gravity Falls, Cat Arwal from An American Tail 5 Goes West, Dick Roman and Metatron from Supernatural, and, to a certain extent, David Xanatos from Gargoyles, and Vlad Masters from Danny Phantom. And you can also make an argument for both Andrew Ryan and Frank Fontaine from the first BioShock game. Disney and Pixar in particular really like to use this trope with some of their twist villains, which include Ernesto de la Cruz from Coco, Lotso from Toy Story 3, King Candy from Wreck-It Ralph, and, to a lesser degree, Mr. Waternoose from Monsters, Inc. and Hans from Frozen, though those last two are much weaker examples of this. One last thing to note before moving on is that in nearly all of these cases, the villain's greatest weapon is also their greatest weakness, as they are nearly always undone by accidentally revealing their sinister nature when they don't realize they're being recorded.
I'll kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die.
What?
I'll kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die.
I should have drowned you all when I flooded the stage!
Hi, I'm Timmy Turner, and I
Cheated on my math test.
I never cheated on my math test. Hi, I'm Timmy Turner, and I cheated on my math test.
Subversions of this character type are rare, but they do exist, usually in the form of the sheep in sheep's clothing, where a character, usually as a red herring, is set up with the expectation of being too good to be true, only to surprise everyone by actually being as genuinely nice as they appear. Chip Skylark from Fairly OddParents and Winston Dever from Incredibles 2 are both examples of this. A more nuanced subversion of this can be found in Undertale's Asgore Dreamer. While his reputation isn't one that's necessarily weaponized against his society, it is weaponized against you, the player. The game's colorful cast of characters consistently talk about him in contradictory ways, setting him up to simultaneously be an all-powerful, ever-looming threat, as well as a complete pushover. And depending on how you play the game, he is both of those things and neither of them at the same time. He is what I'm going to hesitantly call a sheep in sheep's clothing, but the sheep is jacked. We'll see if that catches on at all.
Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
In short, the wolf in sheep's clothing is a very versatile villain type that is a master manipulator, leveraging their reputation, weaponizing the expectations of society, and utilizing the media and technology in order to get away with truly heinous things without anyone being the wiser. This villainous archetype is everywhere, and it's largely thanks to the foundations built upon the back of Othello's Iago. And with that, that brings us to the end of this installment of Evolution. Let me know if there's any other deceptively devilish characters I may have missed, and what avenues of villainy you'd like to explore next. Since Halloween is coming up, I would love to do a holiday special focusing on a specific kind of monster, creature, or horror-centric type of villain. So if there's any in particular that you'd like to see a deep dive on, please let me know in the comments below. And remember, if you enjoyed this video, do all the YouTube things. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, and whatnot. It really helps me to know that you like this enough for me to keep doing it, and it helps you to know when I post new videos. That's all for now. Once again, I'm Danger Dan Jers, and this has been Evolution. Thanks for watching.
I managed to send the elemental back to the dimensional rift, but I don't think I'm gonna make it off this bridge alive. Spider-Man attacked me for some reason. He has an army of weaponized drones, Stark technology. He's saying he's the only one who's gonna be the new Iron Man, no one else.
Are you sure you want to commence the drone attack? There will be significant casualties.
Do it! Execute them all!